I wanted to ask you and anyone else on this call, we're just going to go around very quickly, but like, were there other, in terms of what you were kind of working on in terms of podcasting projects, or what you've, your goals for this kind of thing? Do you have a sense of that? Do you have a sense of what you're sort of after? I mean, anyone can start. Like, maybe we can just, I know people are going to be coming in and out of this call, but maybe we can, anyone who just wants to, they can just put up their hand, like, you can just unmute, or you can just put up your hand if you want. But anyone who wants to start, just introduce themselves, and just any questions that they might have about the lesson today, or about anything that they want to say. I think this can be kind of a good open forum for people to get to know each other and to sort of answer any questions. So please just, you can just unmute and ask, or you can click on the reaction button in Zoom and put up your hand if that's more helpful. Anyone got any questions or anything like that? Oh yeah, okay, please go ahead. Hello?
Well, Paul, maybe I can just break the silence.
Yeah, sure.
Just to answer your question, it's I've just gone through this lesson for today, and what I can understand is that mostly when you think of a story, you don't think of it as a series of episodes. You just have that great idea, and you just want to make sure that you put everything in there and make one story, one big story. But then, like, the inputs that you've given us here, they've made me think broader on how to build on my character, build on momentum, and try to make it as interesting and yes, along those lines. Because when I just think of one big story, I just want to break it and put everything in there and finish it.
Right. But then did you think of it more like multiple episodes?
Yes, but this idea of cliffhangers, it's bringing a different perspective that think of more broadening, bringing in more characters, getting more out of one particular story. So that's
okay. Well, thank you so much. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Does anyone else have anything else to say, or any other comments?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Please.
Yes, I have something to say.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so for me, the content is very helpful in the sense that what I'm trying to do right now is, to build, like, there's a story I did and there was audio in it, like a podcast and all that. So I'm trying to build it into series. So it was just, it was just God sent. And I like the focus, just as you said, because it's audio and people cannot really see you the way you could lose the audience. So it's important that, you build a story first around characters and not lose it within the plot. So that was, that stood out for me. I said, okay, that sounds interesting. So how will I now do it? So that's what I'm really, trying to figure out now.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's also like it's kind of a bit of a shift from certain other kinds of journalism, right? In that way of, like, if you're used to being a lot more story, like plot, like kind of like, getting the facts in order, you'll obviously mention characters and that kind of thing. But with this kind of journalism and this kind of storytelling, like I said, like this is what people will remember, right? Like this is what's going to keep people listening, because the other side of this coin of having multiple episodes is you need to keep people interested so they keep listening. They keep listening to episodes, right? That means they need to subscribe and they need to click onto the next one. So the way to kind of do that, like we were saying, is cliffhangers, but also like, yeah, this idea of character and wanting to know where they go and what they do is really crucial and like really important. Yeah, thanks so much for that. Is there any other comments before we kind of move on to the sort of task that was in the lesson and we kind of go through that a little bit? Are there any other comments that anyone's got? Penny, I see your hand is up. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Penny.
Yes, hi there. Hi, everyone. I was just wondering, you were speaking about the voice. So if you don't have a personal character who will be able to be the voice in your podcast, and you don't want to be the voice, can you just, how do you work around that?
So you don't want to be the voice at all, and you don't really have a main character who you think could make a good voice.
Yeah, or I have a number of characters in this plot that I'm pitching.
Yeah.
But obviously the main character has to talk about, tell the narrative.
Yes.
So can you just choose someone neutral who will handle it then?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can do that. I find that like when people do that, it's like less successful. So even if there's not an emotional, okay, so if you don't want to be in it and you don't feel that that's appropriate and you don't have a kind of like I think the one example that won a bunch of prizes at Third Coast and that I used in the lesson was this idea that it was an investigation of like a young teenager being killed, and they got the mother to be the host, right? That's sort of a very intense sort of way to go about it.
Sure.
So it was produced by a journalist and like scripted, and then essentially like told by this mother who presented the show and did all that stuff. And that was effective. It was a bit like overly effective in a way, but failing on those things, like there might be something a little bit more just technical that you can think of as a link, right? So rather than it be like almost arbitrary, if you were doing something around if it was a healthcare story, there might be someone who has some sort of background in healthcare, that has some skin in the game.
Expert.
Like an expert even. Yeah, I think that can also work. I think what doesn't usually work, if it's just like not the journalist producing it, not that thing, and you don't really want to lie in that way of like, I mean, not that people don't do this, but like, you don't want to get, it makes me a bit uncomfortable, that idea of like, if a journalist produces it and then they just get another journalist to present it, even though obviously that happens in all forms and that's totally acceptable. But like, it might work a little bit better if it's like, an expert, someone who can kind of speak to it in some way, right? Because also that can be helpful for them to kind of, even though they're not like, they're operating more as a host than an expert, they might have things to say and opinions and things like that. We did a story on last year for Volume. We did a series about abortion rights in Kenya, and we went around and around trying to find a host who was appropriate, but also someone who was okay with putting their name to it. And we ended up using someone who was like essentially was originally an expert, but then ended up being the host, who was kind of an activist for abortion rights in Kenya, right? And then they could kind of speak to their experience a little bit in a bit of colorful way at the beginning of episodes and things like that, but ultimately operated as a host. And I think that worked quite well in that way. So that might be something to think about.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about the story as we go along. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Daniel, you have your hand up. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I'll wait.
Who? I can't see who that. Yeah, I think Daniel had his hand up. So Daniel, do you have a question?
Hello, Paul.
Hi.
Daniel. Hi. I'm Daniel Makasi from Goma in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm a podcaster beginner. I started podcasting since 7 months now.
Okay.
My question
Great.
is about how to pick the story of some series of episodes that we have to make. In how manner we have to do that in order to be more interesting for those who, for example, will need to participate in some episodes.
Daniel, I can't, your line's very bad. Do you mind typing the question into the chat? I'm sorry about that. Maybe we can, someone else, maybe we can just take another question while Daniel does that. There was someone else who was,
Yes, that was me.
oh yeah, sorry, I couldn't see who was speaking. Yeah, go for it.
No problem. It's Musiburi Ratibani from Johannesburg, from South Africa.
Hello.
And hi. So quick reactions. I think it's a really cool way to sort of like structure what would be a podcast and basically structure a whole story. And it sort of just like enables you to sort of, you know, get the step-by-step procedure in how to think of a story and how to structure it and how to, you know, so I think that's really great. I wanted to just ask if we could have those examples of the podcasts, the Kenyan podcast with the sexual reproductive or stories in Kenya, or if they are on the website, if I should just go on the website and find the various examples. The reason why I'm asking is that, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but mostly, especially in South Africa, they've been more or less, you know, just interview style, in and out, so to speak. So I'm trying to think of how one would start, you know, in sort of start an actual podcast series. And if, you know, while you're talking about narrations and, you know, who's going to be the host in a way, I'm just trying to figure out like how, you know, in most stories that what I would do is, you know, start with the subject itself and, you know, like go into it being in broadcast and print as well. So, you know, center it around the character, the main character, and have them talk about whatnot, and then have a voice in between. So it's just a bit of a thing where, I mean, I also have, with the story that I'm thinking of is I do have a lot of case studies or people to talk to. And it's, yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out, I don't know if I've got a question, but like I'm just trying to figure out how we would, you know, structure the way that you would narrate it through without losing that personal human interest element in it, if you get what I'm trying to say. So like not having to interject even if I'm voicing it, right? Yeah. Not having to interject and make it, you know, clinical in a way. I wouldn't want to make it clinical. So like having also my views in it, you know, so yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm like trying to figure out how one would do that.
So do you worry that like by bringing yourself in, like interjecting, like you say, that would make it more clinical, essentially?
Yeah, it might. I mean, even if you have someone that, so I mean, ideally, what I would have is basically a story broken down into different chapters, maybe focusing on one person in each, or one specific element of the story in each episode or chapter or whatever. And then also have the characters speak more so than my voice interjecting. So even if it's a conversation that during the interview I'm interjecting or asking questions and so forth, sort of just like stitching the story together and using my voice, I feel that it might be a little clinical, or how, you know, I'm just figuring out like how one would do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's kind of that thing, right, where if you pull back too much in terms of a host, or like say if that's you, then you can, and you kind of pull back because you want to give room to your case study and your person who's speaking, then that ironically can kind of create an effect where it becomes very clinical because people don't really know you as the host, and then you just become like a weird voice of God kind of thing, just like to kind of join the dots. You know, so it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of a hard balance because, you know, I think the instinct as a journalist is to like not put yourself, you know, you want that connective tissue, but you don't want to put yourself into it because it's not your story and all that kind of thing. You know, I mean, I think there's good examples, and I like your suggestion of examples, and I'll post them in the chat a bit later from what we've been speaking about. But I mean, you know, there's a really good version of this which doesn't have you in it, and you, depending on how well you know your case studies, like you get them to you know, like you know, just overly interview them in a way that allows you to just use their voice, you know, that can work really well, you know. And there are examples of like, and I do quite like it. I'm trying to think of the name of things now, of one now, but like, you know, there are examples where, you know, people can be the case study, but they can also like introduce the story and those things, and especially what you're talking about in terms of having a separate episode for each character almost. There might be something quite interesting, even if it's called the same, you know, whatever, the show's called a certain thing, and it's, but like you've got each character that kind of guides you through the story, but also it acts as host as well. If you don't want that critical edge, that might be a really novel way of doing it. You know, it's almost like instead of just having this, or I guess you go the other way and you put more of yourself into it and you allow people to kind of know you and why you are doing it. It's kind of an interesting thing where like if you read a print piece, people don't like ask themselves, why is this person telling the story? But like I think in documentary, I mean, like, you know, sort of video film documentary, especially if it's on something like Netflix, or, you know, like we're seeing more and more, I think people ask more and more, like, why is this person telling this story? I think podcasts are part of that, where, you know, fair or not, people are asking that, because so much of the genre puts that front and center, where you find even now in like corporate like paid for podcasts, the person who's hosting has some reason for hosting this podcast that they're clearly just being paid for to read a script, you know, and they're basically now are at a point where people are like, we can't just get a voice talking head, we've got to get someone who would know about corporate business to do a Succession podcast or whatever. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but it's kind of, we kind of backed ourselves into that corner. But I think from what you're talking about, like getting just your case studies to almost present and carry the episode might be the way around that, might be like a really cool way to do it. But depending on how comfortable you are, feel free to like share stuff over WhatsApp with me or whatever, any like clips or other things that you want to share. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it more.
Okay, cool. Yeah. We'll do.
Is there other, Razia, you got another question, or was your hand just up from before? Someone's coming in. Okay, I think her.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muted. Okay, it's a question.
Okay.
I was just listening to the previous speaker, and I was just trying to look at the story. I was just trying to picture what I'm what I will be doing. So like what I am thinking of doing is like a competition that was done, and then out of this competition we had winners, and then these winners who were selected, they all won in different categories. So I am thinking how do I make this? I have like 20 people. I have 20 people who won this award, and they won in different categories. So I am just thinking aloud, if I was to produce a podcast on this, I'm thinking that, because they say that like each episode, each character, and then they tell a different story because each one has a different story. So would that make sense? But then I'm thinking like having like an opening where we would do like why the competition and maybe the judging criteria that was used to do that. And then in these other episodes that we shall be doing, we can have them telling their story and why they, like why they won and what is the value addition, what they are trying to do in their own words, and how will it impact people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then another question on top of that, because now these are already 20 people. So if I add that extra program for, it will be like 21 episodes.
Okay.
And 21. Okay, so in terms of the duration, what do you think would be the best duration? That will not, because the things that these people are talking, they don't need a lot of details. They're almost straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, is there a way to combine, if they're very short, is there a way in that instance to combine like 3 people into one episode and then have 10 episodes? Is that possible in that way?
Yes, maybe we can. Yeah, actually, yeah, that would be nice, because depending, let's say if the award was in agriculture, then we can do all the agriculture people. If it's finance, all the finance people. Oh, thank you, Paul. That would be nice.
Sure. Yeah, just I mean, you know, it's that kind of thing where you don't want to overwhelm someone, but at the same time, like you are sort of competing with getting once people are kind of listening. If you're engaging, then people will keep listening. But to get them to listen to 31 episodes is quite an ask in this day and age. So maybe 10, like, you know, think about it in terms of a series of 10 might work well. But that's a very interesting idea. Is there any other questions? I just want to go through a little bit on the task for today. If people have other questions, obviously people can post in WhatsApp after this, or if people have missed the call, then they can just post in WhatsApp and I can answer any questions like that. But I just wanted to go through, I mean, it's all there, either in the newsletter or on WhatsApp. But this idea of like pitches for your story, I think is really useful at this stage, right? And even if the idea that you guys have is quite vague, I think it can be helpful. So if you, I'm sure you guys have looked at it, but this idea of doing different versions of the pitch, of like just to kind of make you think about your idea, I think can be really useful. So it's up to you on how open you are with it. You can post it in the group. You can send it just to me on WhatsApp if you want. Yeah, it's up to you. I mean, if you want to share it with the group, that's okay, but I understand that some people don't want to do that. But just to write like 3 versions, basically, like a 2-line pitch, then a shorter paragraph, and then a more of a, and when I say 1 page, it doesn't have to be a whole page, but like a longer version. And I think that just getting your mind around that, because through this week and some of next week, we're going to be kind of going through the different stages of narrative podcast storytelling. And it can help, even if you never do this specific story as a series. I think for this course and this exercise, it can really help to kind of be at least thinking of a story to kind of apply these skills to, right? It can kind of, like with a lot of these things, it can help to have a personal example that you're working through. So that's just what I encourage you guys to do, like just to do those 3 versions of your story, like a 2-line pitch, a paragraph version, and then a longer version. And just to put that as a, you know, I mean, it's up to you. You can do it as a PDF or Word document, or just literally type it straight into WhatsApp. You can send it to me or send it on the group. Just so I can, and I'm happy to give comments if you would like that, as much as possible. Like just for this course, like it's sort of come out of this idea. I'm really happy that you guys are all here and you're all part of it. And part of it is to kind of make it as flexible and as sort of engaging as everyone kind of wants it to be. I think we've all sat in very long courses on very long Zoom calls for many days, and that often doesn't work with people's schedules. So the idea of this is to kind of impart information and give channels for people to kind of talk with each other and ask my advice and those kind of things, but then also feel that you can you can work that into your schedule in any way. And I think that hopefully that will be helpful for people. So anything else that anyone else has to say? I'll put a link to this this recording in WhatsApp. There's one last thing that I'll put in the WhatsApp group as well. If it's more useful for people to have it over Zoom like this, it's useful for me because then we can record it. But if you think this is more of a struggle in terms of connectivity or anything like that, we can actually just do probably a WhatsApp call. If that is more useful for your connectivity or anything like that. I guess the people who have connectivity problems, they're not on this call. So, but yeah, just let me know. Like anything that you think isn't working in the course or that you want more of or anything like that, please just let me know and just put it in the group or WhatsApp me directly. So yeah, but I'm very happy to have you guys here. And yeah, it's very exciting. Hopefully we can get some really great productions and stories and podcasts out of it. And there's sort of a plan to kind of showcase all the content that comes out of these courses as well in a kind of long run idea. So hopefully we can push forward with that. But yeah, so if that's it, if there's anyone else who has any other words or wants to say anything, please go for it now, or we can meet again tomorrow.
Paul, there's a question on the chat. Is there a specific type of topic to work on?
Oh, good question. I didn't see that. Okay. No, on the chat of Zoom. Sorry, there's so much. Sorry. No, there's no specific topic at all. No, of course not. You can anything. It can be something that you are working on, something you would like to work on. It's entirely up to you how connected it is with your work, or it can be kind of almost like a fantasy project that you would kind of like to do. But no, there's no restrictions in that way. But I would encourage you to kind of think around, like, especially what was in today's lesson around like something that will work for this, multiple episodes, something that will kind of have character, something that will have all the elements that we kind of picked out. So on the one hand, it can be anything, but also can't really be a lot of things. And I think that's something that I'd like to stress a lot in this course, is this idea that not every story works. Not every story will work for this kind of thing, right? Some stories are only long enough for 8 minutes on a news bulletin or whatever. But if a story is more complex and has all the things that you want to, this is a great space to tell those stories and to kind of put that out there in an accessible way. So yeah, so it's kind of everything but then within the restrictions that we've sort of been talking about. But yeah,
one last question.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I asked you, I think you forgot to answer this. In terms of duration.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Everybody has their different platforms, but what's like the rule of thumb, like how many minutes per series?
Yeah, I mean, for these kinds of stories, like multiple episode kind of narration kind of stuff, like 30 minutes is still a good rule of thumb, I think. Just in terms of like the effort that it takes. Like I've just finished another series that's coming out soon that's like 4 episodes, and I was trying to edit them down like deliberately to 30 minutes because I feel that's a good length for me. But then, podcasts also go to, as we know, like 3 hours if they're long chat session, Joe Rogan type things. But like, I really wouldn't recommend that for this kind of work. Like, but they can be much shorter. Like, there's people that have had successful, especially the BBC releases narrative podcast episodes that are often like 15 or 14 minutes each episode. So yeah, but I would, an hour I think is your max, I would say, like, right, per episode. And it's a matter of preference, but I wouldn't go over an hour. Oh yeah, I think that's, and I wouldn't go under 12 minutes, so I guess that would be my rule of thumb. But it is up to you. It is entirely up to you in that way.
Thank you.
Sure, pleasure. Any other final thoughts for today? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And we'll continue this in the chat. And thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.